Hi, this is Colin Smith from PhotoshopCafe.com, and today I'm going to give you a demo of Tonality Pro. Now, I'm sure you're aware there's a fantastic program for taking color photographs and converting them to black and white. Well, in this case, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start with a black and white, and then we're going to stylize this. Now, this is not a digital image. I actually shot this on film. It was a Kodak DXN 400. And I shot this a few years ago in Stockholm, Sweden, and scanned this in. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Tonality Pro to bring out a little bit of life in this photograph and have a look at some of the different stylizing options. So as you know, it can be a standalone program. You can launch it from Lightroom, or in this case, I'm going to launch it from Photoshop because this is my favorite application I like to work from. So we're going to go up under the filter here, and then we're going to go down to the Mac Fun software, and we're going to launch Tonality Pro. So we're just going to give it a second here to process this and open it up. Now, just to let you know, when I scanned this, I scanned it in 16-bit mode, and I'm keeping it in 16-bit. You can see that right now. And what that's going to do is it's going to enable me to create a little bit more headroom, a little bit more adjustments without introducing banding and problems like that. So sometimes for a photo like this, you might want to start off with some presets. In this case here, I've opened up the vintage set. There's a number of different presets in here, as you can see, plus you can make your own. And I'll have some of mine, my own ones available soon too. So I'm going to choose the vintage, and we're just going to click on a couple of these. The antique plate looks really neat. Civil War, we've got, as you can see, we've got a whole bunch of different presets here. Personally, I kind of like the Civil War one. This is kind of nice. And if we look at this, this is the before and after. You can see it's brought out some interesting effects here on the image. One of the things you can do too, when you roll over a preset, you'll see this little slider. If you can click and drag this slider, what you can do is you can adjust how much of that preset that you want to apply to the photograph. So you can see that there it is, the original, and there it is, full force. So what I'm going to do though is I'm just going to hit the reset button. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our own look and feel. So let's go up the top here, and we're going to start with the tone. So the tone, this is where we set our overall brightness, darkness, and contrast. So let's have a look here. The first thing we want to do is look at the exposure. We could darken that, or we can lighten it. Notice there's some detail here in these clouds that at some point I want to bring back. So what I'm going to do is just double click to reset this adjustment. Now if we take the adaptive and we pull that down, you'll notice now what I'm able to do is bring out this detail in the sky without losing all the detail here in the foreground. So that's one of the great things about using the adaptive, as you can see there. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit, maybe to about there. I kind of like that toning right there. Next, we're going to go down to contrast. Now, contrast, if we increase it, it's going to boost the blacks and whites and give us a very contrasty image. If we reduce it, what it does is it shrinks the blacks and whites, and you'll see that brings them into the middle there, and then there's not a lot of contrast in there. One of the things you'll notice too, if you roll over the histogram, you can see that we've actually got these little numbers here, which are showing the zone system. And you can actually just go over and even click to set a zone, and it will actually give you a highlight alert of images in that particular zone. I'm not really going to be covering too much of that right now. I just wanted to make you aware of that. So let's reset the contrast by double clicking, and let's look at the smart contrast. Now, I love this because if we reduce it here we go. Now we're able to do some different things with the contrast without washing out the image. If we go the other way, we can do the same thing. We can increase this contrast, and it still gives it a really nice flavor. It kind of softens it and gives it a little bit of a dreamy glow, almost like an Orton slide sandwich effect. I'm going to double click it, and I'm just going to pull it back a little bit to about there. So we're showing the maximum detail right now. One of the things that I really like about tonality is you'll notice there's a little yellow line shows where you've made the adjustment. So you can quickly see at a glance where the adjustments have been made. Also, for example, I'm in these different sliders here. You can see that the tone is now showing yellow because there's been adjustments made to that as well. So this is nice. You can see how far you've made the adjustment, and you can also quickly spot where it's been done. This is super useful for when you're working with presets and you want to make some tweaks to them. And a number of times that's a good way to start, is to actually start with a preset and then just adjust it. Alright, so we're going to go down now and we're going to look at the highlights, midtones, and shadows. This is where you recover detail and your highlights. You can see we can do that, or we can go the other way. I'm going to recover just a little bit of detail, not too much. And now I'm also going to do the same thing in the shadows. We can open up those shadows, and I'm going to open those up a little bit. So right now we're starting to lose a little bit of contrast, but we're going to add that soon when we get to the clarity and structure. So what we're going to do is play around too with the midtones here. We can bring those midtones back, or we can increase them and just see how we get different results there. I'm just going to click up a little bit on there, and then we can set our whites and blacks. If you feel like we're looking at it up here right now, you can see there's nothing in the zone 9 and 10 and our highlights there. We can take the whites if we want, and we can push those up. Now this is something that you're going to find happen more on film than you would in digital, because a lot of the time in digital you're going to lose your detail and your highlights a lot quicker. So let's go to blacks here, and we can also set our blacks down a little bit if we want, or we can go the other way. I'm just going to probably leave the blacks alone for now. So as you can see, we're starting to put a lot of detail here into the sky, which I think is kind of neat right now. And now we're going to go down here, and we're going to go to the clarity and structure. So under clarity and structure, let's go here. We're going to open up our clarity, and see what that does is that really brings out a lot of the detail and the punch in some of these different areas here. And you can see that. It looks good on some of these areas here, but maybe in some of the areas in the water, you might want to do it differently. And we can do that with masks, and we'll approach that soon. So let's continue here. What we're going to do is play around with the structure. Now this is where we start to bring our texture out. See, as we increase that, we start to see some great texture appearing in some of the areas around here, and obviously in the sky. If we want to do protection, it'll just smoothen it off a little bit so it's not so gritty. So that's looking pretty good. And now microstructure, once again, this is really going to bring out some detail nicely for us. And we can boost this if we really want to punch out a lot of detail. And once again, the protection will protect those areas. So we're just kind of playing around right now in these areas here. This is where we're going to be setting our overall definition for the image, so to speak. And right now I'm kind of liking it in certain areas, but maybe in other areas I'm not liking it so much. And I'm feeling like I'm liking it good here, but the sky is maybe a little much. So we have some options. One of the options is we can play around with a mask. We have two options with the mask. We can paint the mask on, so that means when we grab the brush mode, wherever we start painting is where we apply the mask. Or if we use the eraser, it will take the mask away. So that's what we're going to do right now, is we're going to take the eraser and we're just going to clean up the sky a little bit. So I'm going to hit the left bracket key, and I'm going to drop the size of my brush down, and I'm just going to paint across. Notice as I do this, I'm painting away the adjustment. I'm going to make it a little smaller here, and I'm just going to paint away down here. Now, one of the things I could do is I could try and work my way around this pole, but it's much quicker just to paint right over the top of it. And you'll see that the adjustments that we made didn't really affect it that much. But if we want to protect it later, we can. And I'll show you how we do that. We're just going to show our mask by clicking show. You can see where the mask is. And now you could grab your little paint tool, and we're just going to drop our brush down. And I find it's a lot easier to do this and then just paint back those bits of detail than try and paint around them when you're erasing. Now we're probably not going to see too much of a difference with this, but I do just want to protect it a little bit. So this will stay with the area that we just painted and adjust it. There we go. And I'm going to turn off the show mask. And let's have a look and see what we've got before and after right now. So if we look at before and after, you can see how much texture and detail we've added down here. You can see it in the buildings and some of those cobblestones and things like that. Once again, before, after. So now they actually look like they're made out of stone. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the sky separately. So I'm not going to have to create this mask all over again. What I'm going to do is go to the layers, and we can see there's the layers that we have made. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. And now the layer on the top I'm going to use for the sky. Now I don't want to mask it out again. I'm going to use this mask. So I'm going to click on the mask, right click, choose copy mask. Now go to the mask of the new layer, right click, and we're going to choose paste mask. Now we have exactly the same mask. The only thing is we want to adjust the areas outside of the areas we've already adjusted. So we want to invert that mask. So we're going to right click, and then we're going to choose invert mask. So now we're only going to work in the areas that have not been adjusted. So let's go back to the tone and let's play around with the sky a little bit more. Let's play around with the adaptive here, maybe bring that back a little bit. And we're going to play with our smart contrast. I'm going to bring it back a little bit there. And let's play around with some of our different tones. Let's try out mid-tones, maybe darken those a smidge. Not too much happening there in shadows, but I would imagine, there we go, in the highlights, pull those back just a little bit, not too much. And I'm going to leave the whites and the blacks alone. So let's go down to the clarity and structure, and let's see what we can get here working with our sky. So let's have a look at the clarity. I'm probably not going to do much with the clarity. In fact, I'm not going to do anything with it. And let's play around here a little bit with our structure. There we go. Start to put a little drama in there. I'm going to put some protection in there. And it's just going to reduce some of the noise a little bit. And let's do the microstructure. So let's play around with that. I'm going to actually take it to the left a little bit and play around with the boost and the protection. Now the reason I did that, because if we go to the right, it's going to become super grainy. So I wanted to still apply a nice little bit of detail in here. And once again, we can boost that up without creating too much grain. So I'm going to drop that down a little bit more, and I'm going to turn the protection up even more. So what we've been able to essentially do now is do our sky separately, and now we don't have like that huge grain that's there, because, you know, already shooting with a black and white film, there was already a certain amount of grain there. But I'm kind of liking what we're seeing right now. And a lot of the time, this is how I like to work. I like to work on a separate layer for the sky or the super bright areas, and then a separate layer there for the rest of the image. So now that we've done the sky and we're really happy with the sky, I'm going to go back to the rest of the image here. And I'm actually going to go back to my hand tool, so I'm not in the mask anymore. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play around with the tonality here. And I just want the tones here in the foreground to work really well with the sky. So I might tweak the exposure just a little bit. Not that much. You can see when we start to go too high, be aware some of these little halos and stuff like that can start to show up. So just a little bit goes a long way. And that's just because of the mask. I could always go into the mask, zoom in, and continue. If I want to zoom in much closer here, I can go in here and start to really refine that mask and get it a lot better. Now, that's something I would definitely recommend that you do at home. I'm just going to choose fit here to fit it back on screen, but I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. So I'm just going to tweak the adaptive a little bit. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm just tweaking this area here, so I just feel it's going to match a little bit better with the sky that we've created. So that's looking pretty good. So right now what we've got is I've got the overall tonality. Now, as you're probably aware too, we've got a lot of cool different things in here for creating different types of special effects. We've done the clarity and the set the overall mood, the tonality and all that we've set right now. Some of these next ones down here will enable us to do more with the adjustment. The color filter would really work more when you've converted this from from a color, to a black and white image, and this will work with the RGB channels. So we're not going to do anything in this particular case. The curve, we could play around with the curve if we like, and this is a curve very much like the curve you would get in Photoshop. But now if I apply this curve, as you see here, it's only going to affect that area that I've masked. So I'm just going to undo that, and I'll show you how to undo anything. Just go under there, and we can just hit that little refresh button there with the arrows, the curved arrows. So if I'm going to do anything like that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another layer on top, because now that I've masked these and I brought the structure and the detail out separately, I want to do all the other adjustments together so it doesn't look so much like I've created two masks. I want these to have a kind of cohesiveness together. So what we're going to do is go down to the tone curve, and now when I make this adjustment, if I want to, you'll see there it'll affect the entire image now. So maybe we're just going to pull that down a little bit in the midtones, give it a little bit of a moody feel. And let's go up here. And what I'm doing is I'm just giving it a little slight boost in contrast, but exactly where I want it. There we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm bringing out the detail under the bridge there, while I'm also giving it a little boost in the in those brighter areas there without losing too much detail. So let's have a look and see how this looked before and after. If we turn it off and we turn it on, so it just kind of opened it up a little bit. And one of the things you might want to do too is maybe go down here in the shadows and just pull it down slightly in the shadows. That's probably a little too much. A little bit goes a long way. There we go. And so if we look at this before and after, we've given this a little boost of contrast. And it just makes it look a little bit more natural to me, because I felt like it was just a little too much detail showing. You're starting to get a little faux HDR, and I don't really want that for this particular image. So if we look at what we've done here, you can see that. Now if you feel that it's too much, you can take it back and you can just dial that in exactly how much you want. And you can do that with any of the layers. As you can see there, we can do that just with the sky. And also we can go down here and we can do different things with blend modes. Now, this particular tutorial, I'm not going to be doing anything with the blend modes. All right, what we want to do now is we want to give it our coloring effect. So I'm going to create another layer on top, and I always like to do this when I'm doing my coloring, is I like to do this separately than all the other adjustments, and in that way you can have more freedom with it, and you can experiment, and you don't really have to worry about it affecting the image in not such a good way. So for example, I can reduce the color, I can reduce the transparency and apply the color exactly how much I want. So let's go down here and we're going to look at the color settings. Now the color settings really are going to be under here. We've got our split toning, and this is where we're going to apply a lot of our color. So let's go in here, and there's some presets up here. Let's have a look at these preset split tones, and you can see the different looks that we can get there just by simply clicking on these. And these are pretty neat. It's giving it kind of a little bit of a duotone and kind of a feel there. So what we're going to do though is I'm just going to hit the refresh, and we're going to start with our own. So let me try just a classic. What I like to do sometimes is to do a yellow in the highlights, just a little bit, not a lot. And then I like to do like a green in the shadows. It's just an interesting, good place to start. And I'm just going to give that a little bit of a touch there. So that's looking quite nice. And what we can do too is we can take the balance and we push it towards one of the colors or the other one. And you can see how that changes the overall feel. Now we can start to experiment if we want with different colors. Now that I've kind of set a baseline here, maybe we can try a warmer shadow and give it a little more saturation, which will give it more of that color. See that? I'm going to take it to about there. That feels really good to me. I kind of like that. And also we can adjust the amount. So there's none, and then we can pull it up that way, which would be the same as, just adjusting it here. And I prefer to just have it on a separate layer. It's just how I like to work. And also that means if I want to apply anything else on here at the same time, I can keep it with my color. So that's looking pretty good. I'm kind of liking that color. It's nothing too extreme. It's just a little bit subtle. If you want to make it more extreme, what you want to do is turn up your saturation. And see there, you can get it really kind of crazy. I don't want to do that, but maybe I'll give it a little bit more to about there. I'm kind of liking the way that looks. Now, if you want to check in and see how this looks compared to the original, just click the little eye icon up there. There's the original, and there's the adjustments we've been making. So you can see, we've really done quite a bit. And then once I compare it to the original, it feels it's a little strong. So I'm just going to take it back a little bit. There we go. And let's compare it to the original. And that's starting to look a lot better. Now, there's other settings in here, and some of these are more special effects. We've got the glows, the lens blurs, textures, vignettes, grains, photo frames, things like that. And these, I might put a little bit of a vignette in here, I think would be nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create yet another layer, and that one's going to go on the top here. Now, why did I create another layer? And if I turn that one off, you can see it's not doing much there, but see how it's kind of affecting it there by turning it into black and white. Well, what do? We can take the color layer and drag it to the top, and we'll put that one above it, and notice how that filters down and affects everything underneath. So I always like to put the color on top. And let's go down here, and this is our special effects layer. I'm not going to do a lot with this layer, but what we're going to do here is we're going to put a vignette in here. So we're just going to click the little arrow to open this up, and I'm just going to bring it down a little bit, just kind of darken a little bit in those edges, and that just draws your eye into the center of the photo. Now let's look at this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the feather down all the way down so you can actually see this vignette. So the amount here is just, do you want to darken it or do you want to lighten it? The size here will increase or decrease the size of the vignette. We've got the roundness, so we can change the shape of the vignette, and you can even go like that if you want. The feather will create the softness around the edge. Luminosity will brighten up the inside. And also we have the option to place the center. So I can actually click here and I can move the vignette around. And let me just turn the feather up a little bit so you can see it better. And we can play around with the roundness and the size if we want to make that larger or smaller. So this is kind of interesting. So if I wanted to bring the emphasis of the photo over here and not so much over there, we can do that by changing the center. We can do the same thing here. We can place the center over here, and now it's really about the river and the trees and not so much about the people. So it really depends on the composition. Notice I moved the center here. It just really completely changes the image, or I can put it right in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it over here a little bit, and I'm going to bring the emphasis over here. And I'm just going to turn the amount down a little bit because I feel it's just a little too strong, because I don't want to, just completely darken that right out. So let's pull it down to about there and maybe give it a little more in the size. And now you can see, if I do this before and after, how it's just kind of cleaning up the image and focusing you a little bit more on the composition. So you can see that there's another effect that I'm going to show you here. Let's go and have a look at this one. And let's go down to the glow. I'm going to show you the glow here. This is kind of an interesting effect. If we turn the glow on a little bit, you can see it kind of gives us a really neat effect. So I'm just going to turn it up really bright so you can see it working very strong. And this is what the smooth does. If you take it to the left, it gives it a lot less, and you turn it up, it just changes the flavor. And this kind of gives a real autumn kind of a slide sandwich effect to me. So I'm going to bring this down to about there. Let's take the threshold, see how it just really affects how that glow is working. And you see what it's doing is it's just affecting different areas in the highlights. So if we push it further up here, it's going to go more into the midtones and really affect that. And here it's just affecting more in the highlights. And this just gives this nice kind of a dreamy effect. So I kind of like that, but I'm just going to do it subtle. I'm going to take the glow all the way down, and now I'm just going to give it just a little touch. There we go. And it just gives this photograph a really dreamy kind of romantic feel to it now. So let's click the before and after. You can see what we've done. So at this point here, if you want to create a new preset, I'm just going to click create, and I'm going to call it romantic. And I'm going to click add. And now I've created that preset. So if I ever want to dial this up again, I can. And I simply go under here, and I'll look under the user presets, and I'll see I've got some different ones here. So here's one that I made before. There's another one I made. And I'm just going to apply this one here. So you can see how that's affecting it in different ways. All right. So overall, here's our image that we've done. This is, I'm kind of happy with that. One of the other things you can do is, once again, you can play around with these layers. You can increase or decrease the opacity of those and change the way they affect the image. But let's have a look at this. We've got the before and the after, and I'm kind of happy with this effect, and I'm just going to click apply. And now what it's going to do is it's going to process this image and it's going to go back into Photoshop, which is the host application, and then it's just going to apply this effect right there in Photoshop. So one of the other things to bear in mind too is if I was working on a smart object, I would be able to use this as a smart filter, so it would be non-destructive, and I could go back and reuse it over and over again. So that's just a little tour there of a stylizing a black and white photograph using MacFun Tonality Pro. And once again, I'm Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe. Thanks for watching.